Well, I'm with a Tasmanian icon in broadcasting, but you're a counsellor as well, Wendy Kennedy. You also do a lot of work with the Men's Shed. And that's where we are today, which is the annual general meeting. Around 90 people from 70 plus sheds, Wendy. What an incredible day.
A huge day, Esther. There's 71 sheds in Tasmania, which equates to about close to 4,000 members. So it's a big cohort of men around Tasmania. And of course, men's sheds are a men's health program. A lot of people think it's just about old blokes going and sort of, making a few things, but really it's about connecting men. It's all about men's health and well-being, looking after each other, looking after their mates. And earlier in the day, Minister Jensch was actually just talking about he visits a lot of sheds and he's really active in the space, and he will say every time he goes to a shed there'll be a bloke that'll pull him aside and say, this place has saved my life, or I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this place. And that's the importance of the role that men's sheds play in our communities.
You're the executive officer. I know how much time you dedicate to this. How did you get involved? Why this project?
I was interested in where older men were sort of fitting into society. I'd always worked in male-dominated areas, coming from a horse racing background, and to a degree in the areas of media that I worked in, it was predominantly sort of male-focused. And I looked at the Me Too movement and started thinking about where older men fitted into society these days. And there's a lot of bad press about men. And yeah, we know there's stuff that happens out there in society that is not great. And we're hearing a lot at the moment about domestic violence and some horrendous stories. But we can't just lump all men in together and go, look, basically men are bad. And so you'll find that a lot of men start to feel like, we're all getting blamed for this behaviour, and so they just don't know how they kind of fit. And because we're living in a world that, the whole political correctness, their way of behaving with women and, they've been used to or growing up opening doors, they don't know whether to do that anymore. They don't know whether to offer a chair, offer a seat. They're just not quite sure. So they become a little bit more withdrawn and tend to isolate themselves. And that's where going to a shed and hanging out with their mates where they can feel comfortable in saying what they want to say, doing what they want to do. One of my favourite things is when I'm outside a shed and listening to the banter that goes on in there, and where they're stirring each other up and having a joke and throwing around some colourful language and just being men.
And there's that transition, isn't there, from retirement to, I know it's open for all men and some are community sheds now too, but there's that transition from retirement to what do you do now?
Absolutely, and that's a really big area. And I remember one of my girlfriends, even before I moved into this role, saying to me, she couldn't wait, her husband couldn't wait until he retired, and he was going to play golf 3 or 4 times a week. They had a small acreage, and he's going to play on his little farm with his dogs and his horses and get the garden going, and he's hanging out for it. And 2 or 3 months in, she rang me and she said, look, I don't know what's wrong with Pete. He's just really depressed. And I said, I know what it is. He's just missing all his mates from work, because mates say we're going to keep in touch. We'll have lunch once a week. We'll ring each other, but they don't. Women sort of tend to hold on to those networking groups a lot better than men do. And so all of a sudden they've just lost that structure, they've lost those support groups, especially men that have been in services, and we have a number of veterans sheds as well. So when we talk about men go to sheds for that mateship, now we have sheds that have mixed days, ladies' days, community sheds where it's open to both. It's not anything to do with gender wars or anything like that. But women go to sheds to get things done. They want to make something. They want to learn how to use tools. They want to learn how to do things around their house. Men don't. They go for a completely different reason. And you and I, if we decide we want to have a girls' weekend away, or we want to have a girls' lunch or a girls' night out, and one of our girlfriends wants to bring their husband or their partner or their boyfriend, we just go, that's not on.
No.
This is for the girls. And it's the same with blokes. They just need to have that bloke time. And most of their wives and partners, they totally get it. They know why. I went to one of the sheds one Monday morning, Bicheno, I think it was. I was just driving past, and they don't normally open on that morning. And I just drove up there to deliver something, I think. And I said, what are you all doing here? Couldn't wait to get away from our wives after the weekend. I thought, I reckon it's the other way around. They just all said, get to the shed, we've had enough of you after the weekend. So, there's a whole lot of women behind men understanding that the blokes need bloke-only time. It's really, really important. And it's not just making this stuff up. It's the research is there. And we talk about what the guy that runs our Finishing Strong program, where Tasmania still leads the country in male suicides. Statistically, this alarmed me when I first heard it. The average man over 60 has one male friend, and it decreases the older they get. So the highest suicide age bracket for men is 80. Lost a partner, lonely, isolated, withdrawn from society, starts to question their ability to be able to mix socially. Hearing starts to go, feel a bit embarrassed. And, as soon as they get along to a shed and find a whole lot of other blokes similar, it fixes things. Our doctor shed it bangs on all the time about the cognitive side of things and how by going to a shed and just doing basic things, it might be just playing cards or it might be just sitting there around the fire having a conversation, how doing that can actually stave off dementia in so many different ways. It's quite incredible. He will talk about how in the UK they have a minister for loneliness. We don't have that in Australia. That's how serious it's taking. They used to say that sitting is the new smoking, or now it's loneliness is sort of like heart attack and smoking rolled into one. It's one of the most dangerous things for your health, to be isolated and lonely, because we're social creatures. I've been in the job for 5 years and they feel like, someone said to me today, I don't know whether it was the minister or someone else, and he said, it must be like, there was 90 odd men in the room, it must be like having 90 dads or grandpas or brothers. And, I've lost my dad and I've lost 2 of my brothers and I don't have either of my grandpas, and I love so many of these blokes. They're all friends and family now. And, I love hearing their stories, and thank goodness that you've been here today capturing so many of their stories. And that's the other thing when you look at the work they do in their communities. And I have to really dig to get the stories out of them or find out what they're doing, because they just take it for granted. They're very modest. They don't actually put a value on what they're doing in the community, and yet you look at what you would put on the man hours of what they contribute to their communities is huge. You couldn't pay people to do the work that they actually do, so it's pretty special.